Imagine you are standing on a quiet street corner. It's a warm morning. There's a tram stop nearby. You look like any ordinary person waiting for a ride. But under your coat, a submachine gun. And coming around that corner, in an open-topped car with no escort, is one of the most feared men alive. The architect of the Holocaust, Hitler's favorite. The man who chaired the meeting where Nazi Germany planned the murder of every Jewish person in Europe. He is riding to work, top down, no bodyguards, because he believes no one in this city would dare. You step into the road. You raise the gun. You point it directly at his chest from 10 feet away. You pull the trigger, nothing. The gun doesn't jam with a click. It doesn't grind. It makes no sound at all. It simply refuses. And the most powerful man in occupied Europe is staring directly at you. That moment, that single, silent, catastrophic failure on a Prague street corner on the morning of May 27th, 1942, is where this story begins. But it is not where it ends. It ends several weeks later. In the dark, in a flooded crypt beneath a church on Resslova Street, where 7 men, paratroopers, soldiers, volunteers, held off 750 elite SS troops for 6 hours, with pistols, without surrender. This is Operation Anthropoid, the most daring assassination of the Second World War, and the final stand that history has never forgotten. To understand what happened on that street corner, you need to understand who was sitting in that car. Reinhard Heydrich, born 1904. By 1942, he held more real power over more human lives than almost any other person in occupied Europe. He was not a soldier. He was an administrator, and that made him far more dangerous than any soldier could ever be. He built the system. In January 1942, Heydrich chaired the Wannsee Conference. 15 senior officials of the Third Reich gathered around a table in a villa outside Berlin. In 90 minutes, they formalized the plan to murder every Jewish person in Europe, 11 million people. Heydrich ran that meeting like a board meeting, efficiently, methodically, without emotion. Heinrich Himmler called him the man with the iron heart. Hitler called him the man with the iron heart. He wore both descriptions like a decoration. In September 1941, Hitler appointed him Reich Protector of Bohemia and Moravia. What that meant in practice was simple. He arrived in Prague and he broke the city. Within weeks, resistance networks that had taken years to build were dismantled. Czech workers were given food rations and told to produce for the Reich or face consequences. Cultural institutions were shut down. Universities closed. The underground press silenced. The will to resist, which had been simmering since the Munich betrayal of 1938, began to suffocate. It was working. The Czechoslovak government in exile in London watched what was happening to their country. They understood that every month Heydrich remained in Prague, the resistance lost ground it would never recover. And then someone in London made a decision that changed everything. If Heydrich cannot be removed from Prague, then Heydrich must be removed from the world. They selected 2 men, a Slovak paratrooper named Josef Gabčík, a Czech paratrooper named Jan Kubiš, both trained by the British Special Operations Executive at facilities in Scotland, both volunteers, both fully aware that the mission they were being asked to perform had essentially no route of escape. On the night of December 28, 1941, a Halifax bomber took off from RAF Tongmere in England. Over the dark fields of occupied Bohemia, 2 men stepped out of the aircraft into the winter sky. From that moment, they were alone. They had been in Prague for 5 months. 5 months of living under false identities, false names, false papers, false jobs, moving between safe houses, never staying anywhere long enough to be traced, learning the city, learning its rhythms, learning the routes, the schedules, the habits of the man they had come to kill. Heydrich was meticulous about his security, except for one thing. Every morning, without variation, he made the same journey, from his country estate at Panenske Brzezany, along the same road, through the same streets, to his headquarters at Prague Castle. Same route, same time. Top down on the Mercedes, regardless of weather, because Reinhard Heydrich believed no Czech would dare touch him. That arrogance was his death warrant. The assassins identified the perfect location. A sharp, hairpin bend on a road in the Prague district of Leiden, where any car was forced to slow almost to a stop. There was a tram stop nearby, a reason to stand and wait without attracting attention. There was an escape route. It was, by the standards of assassination planning, as close to ideal as they were likely to find. They settled on a plan. Gabčík would step into the road and open fire with the Sten. Kubiš would be positioned nearby with modified anti-tank grenades as backup. Additional agents, Josef Valčík, Adolf Opalka, and others, would act as lookouts along the route, signaling when Heydrich's car was approaching. The date they chose was May 27, 1942. What none of them discussed openly, what all of them understood, was that this was almost certainly a one-way operation. The assassination of the Reich protector in broad daylight in the middle of an occupied city would trigger a response so massive, so total, that the idea of escape was more hope than plan. They knew this. They went anyway. The morning of May 27th was warm and clear. Gabčík was at the tram stop first, coat buttoned, Steen underneath, waiting. Kubiš further around the bend, 2 modified grenades in a briefcase. Waiting. Josef Valčík further up the road with a small signal mirror. When Heydrich's car came into view, the mirror would catch the sunlight and flash once. At 10:32 in the morning, it flashed. Gabčík unbuttoned his coat, stepped into the road, raised the Sten. Heydrich's Mercedes rounded the corner, top down, no escort, exactly as it had every morning for months. The trigger was pulled. Nothing. Heydrich made the last mistake of his life. Instead of ordering his driver to accelerate, he stood up and drew his own pistol. The car stopped. Kubiš threw the grenade. The throw was slightly off. The grenade struck the rear wheel arch rather than the interior, but the explosion drove shrapnel upward through the bodywork, metal, fragments of the upholstered seat, horsehair and dirt, directly into Heydrich's body. Both men escaped on bicycles into the chaos of the street. Heydrich was rushed to the Belovka hospital. He was operated on. He received the best medical care the Reich could provide. For 8 days, it appeared he might survive. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich died. Not from the blast. The horsehair and filth driven deep into his wounds had poisoned his blood. Sepsis, caused by an old car seat. The most feared man in occupied Europe, killed not by a bullet, but by upholstery. Hitler's response was immediate. 13,000 people arrested across Bohemia and Moravia. Homes raided, families torn apart. The Gestapo offered 1 million Reichsmarks for information leading to the assassins. Nobody talked. And then Hitler went further. The village of Lidice was falsely accused of sheltering the assassins. Every man in the village, 173 of them, was shot. Every woman sent to Ravensbrück. The children assessed for racial suitability. Those deemed insufficiently Aryan gassed. The village burned to the ground, bulldozed flat, removed from every map. A second village, Lejaki, received the same. Meanwhile, Gabchik, Kubish, and 5 other paratroopers were hiding in the crypt of the Cathedral of Saints Cyril and Methodius on Resslova Street. The bishop and clergy had taken them in. For 3 weeks, nobody gave them up. And then Karel Churda walked into Gestapo headquarters. He was one of them. Same training, same mission, same occupied country. He wanted the money. He gave the Gestapo names, addresses, families. Under torture, those families gave more. The chain led, step by step, to a church on Resslova Street. Churda survived the war, collaborated with the Gestapo until liberation. Arrested in 1947, tried for treason, hanged. At his trial, when asked why, he said, "I would like to see what any of you would do when your family was threatened." The court was not persuaded. June 18th, 1942, 4 in the morning. Military vehicles begin moving quietly into Resslova Street. No sirens, no announcement, just engines in the dark and boots on stone. 750 soldiers, 40 Gestapo officers, machine guns, submachine guns, hand grenades, tear gas canisters, fire hoses, explosives. The street is sealed at both ends. Every side street blocked, every exit covered. Inside the church, 7 men, armed with pistols, in the dark. They had known this moment was coming. Not today specifically, but they had known from the night they stepped out of that aircraft over Bohemia that it would come. They had weapons, they had each other. They had no way out. The SS commander sent his first assault team through the front doors of the church at dawn. 3 paratroopers, Opalka, Kubish, and Schwark, were in the choir loft above the nave. They opened fire with their pistols. The assault team withdrew, leaving dead on the floor of the nave. The commander sent more men. Kubish was hit. Multiple times, he kept firing. He died in the choir loft from his wounds, still holding his weapon. 2 of the 7 were gone. In the crypt below, Gabchik and 3 others, surrounded, outnumbered beyond any reasonable calculation, and still fighting. The SS tried everything. They threw tear gas canisters through the ventilation window into the crypt. The 4 men below wrapped cloth around their faces and kept firing. They detonated explosive charges at the crypt entrance. The men fought through the dust and the noise. They brought a bishop to the ventilation window, the same bishop who had sheltered these men at the cost of everything, and asked him to call down to them and check, to tell them to surrender, to promise them their lives would be spared. From the darkness below, silence. Then a single shot fired upward through the window. Their answer. The battle had been going on for hours. The crypt was filling with smoke and gas. The 4 men's ammunition was running low. And then the SS brought the fire hoses. They forced the hose nozzles through the ventilation window and began pumping cold water directly into the sealed crypt. The floor began to fill. 4 men, rising water, tear gas in the air, walls closing in. No ammunition left, no exit, no surrender. At some point, the shooting from below stopped. When the SS finally breached the crypt entrance and forced their way inside, they found 4 men. Each had used his last bullet on himself. They had kept those bullets, set them aside, known at some point during those 6 hours exactly what they were for. The SS found no one to capture, no one to interrogate, no one to parade through the streets of Prague as proof of their victory. 7 men had entered that church. 7 men were dead. Not one had surrendered. The bullet holes in the walls of the Cathedral of Saints, Cyril and Methodius, have never been repaired. They are still there. The wall around the ventilation window is still fractured, still marked. A permanent record cut into the stone of what happened here. Heydrich was the highest-ranking Nazi official assassinated during the entire war. Operation Anthropoid remains the only government-sanctioned assassination of a senior Nazi leader successfully carried out. The Munich Agreement, the 1938 deal that handed Czechoslovakia to Hitler, was formally revoked by the Allied powers. Czechoslovakia would be restored, in part because 7 men had shown the world that occupied Czechoslovakia was still fighting. Every year since 1945, on the 18th of June, a memorial service is held at this church. The names read aloud, the bullet holes still in the walls around them. 7 names: Józef Gabčík, Jan Kubiš, Adolf Opálka, Józef Valčík, Jaroslav Schwarz, Józef Bublik, Jan Hruby. They went into the dark, and the world, very slightly, almost imperceptibly, bent in a different direction because of it. If you made it this far, you already know there are more stories like this one. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.